My parents made me leave so my favored sibling could occupy the home, even though I paid for it, but retribution arrived quicker than anticipated. I, 38F, have dedicated the past 16 years to building my career as a high-level executive at a major financial institution in a busy financial district. This account centers on my complicated relationship with my sister, Sarah, 48F, my parents, now in their early 80s, and a residence I recently acquired for their use that has become the origin point of persistent family discord. I need to transport you back to the start to show you how this situation developed. My parents were nearing their 50s when I arrived, making me an unplanned arrival. My mother would frequently mention that they already had Sarah, who was 9 years old then, and she was quite enough. She didn't express this with ill will, but rather in a tone that somehow worsened the impact. She would remark, "We didn't anticipate you," while she was coordinating Sarah's after-school activities or assembling her university admission papers. These seemingly innocent comments, which acted as a continuous reminder of my standing as a secondary thought in our family, formed the backdrop of my early years. I might not even be here if it hadn't been for the persistence of my mother's parents. My parents viewed me as an unrequested burden, but they were overjoyed by the prospect of having a second grandchild. I was a secondary thought in my parents' lives, and that was apparent right away. They had the same routine each morning when they dropped me off at my grandparents' place. My dad would remark to my grandpa, "You were the one who wanted her," as he got ready to head off to work, keys jingling in his hand. "She's completely your responsibility." My grandparents' residence transformed into my genuine abode, a sanctuary where I experienced true affection and belonging. They made sure I was fed and cared for, collected me from school, assisted me with my assignments, and accompanied me to the local park. I would spend lengthy periods acquiring knowledge about numbers and problem-solving from my grandpa, a former mathematics teacher. He'd declare, "Figures never deceive." These lessons would subsequently shape my professional selections in manners I couldn't have foreseen at the time, such as, "They recount tales more truthfully than people do." At their kitchen counter, my grandma would aid me with my school assignments every afternoon, ensuring I fully grasped each concept. Her patience seemed endless. She had taught secondary school before retiring. She would add, "Knowledge is the sole possession no one can take from you," in a firm yet gentle manner. She also instructed me in cooking as a method of expressing my imagination and affection, instead of considering it a chore. These hours spent in their kitchen, reviewing my school day and mastering precise ingredient measurement, became some of my most treasured memories. My parents, who were usually worn out and somewhat annoyed about having to make the journey, would only arrive to collect me late in the evening. "Clara," my grandma would say as she bid me farewell each night, "you are the best thing that has ever occurred to us." I could almost forget that I wasn't desired anywhere else while enclosed in her loving embrace. They became my emotional pillar, providing me with the stability and affection that were noticeably absent at my primary residence. My grandpa would frequently add, "Keep in mind, sometimes the finest things in existence weren't planned." I learned to exist as an afterthought in my own dwelling as Sarah prepared for her bright future. My sister simply acted as though I didn't exist. She wasn't malicious or cruel. She would be lying on the sofa chatting on her device about guys and university applications, completely oblivious to me, while I played with my toys in the corner of our shared common area. The discrepancy in how my parents treated Sarah and me was obvious and consistent. I would overhear my mother's proud tone as she discussed Sarah's achievements with relatives or companions. "Sarah achieved top marks again." "Sarah was accepted onto the debate group," or "Sarah got into her preferred university." They attended all her school functions, science exhibitions, and debating tournaments. They consistently cited, "We're too fatigued," "We need to work," or "You comprehend, don't you?" as justifications for their glaring absence from my events. My grandparents adopted the role of my cheerleaders, attending every school function with delight and genuine pride on their countenances. I hoped that things at home would improve when Sarah departed for university. I was the daughter who remained, and perhaps my parents would finally notice me. I was completely mistaken. I transitioned from being unseen to being the household helper at the age of 15. My mom would call out to me, "Clara," before I could even set down my school bag after class. "The residence requires cleaning. Commence with the restrooms." Sarah's tasks were handed over to me, along with numerous extra duties. I grew to know the washing machine configurations and quirks intimately, and it became my daily companion. Cleaning, cooking, and maintaining a dwelling for parents who barely acknowledged my presence seemed like a continuous cycle of domestic work. My dad would remark, "You reside here. You must contribute." If I hesitated even slightly, "Your sibling always did her part." My career advanced from cleaning to cooking by the time I was 15. The shift wasn't gradual. My mother simply ceased preparing the evening meal one day. One morning she declared, "You are sufficiently old now. We expect dinner ready when we return from our jobs." I maintained an outstanding academic record in spite of the demanding domestic responsibilities. My educators encouraged me to participate in various scholarly competitions after observing my aptitude for economics and numbers. To help me get ready, my grandpa would dedicate additional time to teaching me complex concepts that were far beyond my current level. He would exclaim, "You possess a talent with figures," with pride shining in his gaze. "Allow no one to tell you differently." Imagining university was the only method I could escape. I would retreat to my chamber each night after handling the dishes and browse through university websites. I would picture myself traversing several campuses, far removed from the never-ending tasks and chilly silences. I was rewarded for my diligence in school despite my household duties. I maintained straight A's, and at the age of 17, I received acceptance letters from several prestigious universities, including some renowned for their excellent economics programs. Sarah's engagement occurred next. One Sunday afternoon, she bounded through the front entrance, leading a tall, sharply dressed man along with her. She let out a shriek, "Mom! Dad! This is David. We are getting married." You would have believed someone had just announced winning the lottery, with my mom crying tears of joy and my dad already retrieving his device to contact relatives. My parents literally sprang from their seats. "We will cover everything," my mother exclaimed as she embraced Sarah. "Our first daughter's wedding celebration must be perfect." 4 months, our dwelling was filled with wedding preparations. Every conversation revolved around guest lists, locations, and floral arrangements. With costly attire, upscale vendors, and everything at the highest standard, funds appeared to flow like water. Despite attending the ceremony, my grandparents didn't appear to appreciate the lavish decorations. My grandpa simply shook his head at the bubbly tower, and I saw my grandma frown at a sculpture that most likely cost more than a semester's university fees. However, they likely already understood what was going to happen, so they kept their thoughts to themselves. I shared the wonderful news with my parents while seated at our dinner table, with 3 envelopes spread out before me, on the day I received my acceptance letters. My heart was racing. "That is pleasant," my mother whispered without lifting her gaze from her meal. "But we are unable to finance it. We spent our entire savings on your sister's wedding celebration, even took out a loan for it. There is nothing left for university." I stammered and said, "But you financed Sarah's university," barely raising my voice above a murmur. "That situation was different," my mom stated dismissively. "We recognized possibility in her." The ensuing quiet was overwhelming. "You should seek employment, accumulate some funds, and take out educational loans. That is what responsible adults do," my dad said between sentences. I had never before dared to depart from the table without receiving permission. Grabbing my device with trembling hands, I called my grandma. Within moments, I was crying as I entered their familiar front door. As he listened to my story, my grandpa's expression hardened, but I could not quite interpret the glint in his eyes. They exchanged a knowing glance after I had recounted everything. My grandpa took my hand and said, "Clara, we have been saving for your schooling since the day you were born, so we have been anticipating something like this." He returned with a folder after walking to his study. Account statements demonstrating years of careful saving were found inside. "You can select any of those universities. We have you financially supported." I relocated to my grandparents' place that evening after packing my necessary items. When I informed my parents I was leaving, they were downstairs watching television and barely glanced up. My mom said, "Whatever you believe is most suitable," while maintaining her gaze fixed on the screen. Did I detect the sense of relief in her voice? The years that followed were transformative. I decided to enroll in one of the best business schools to pursue economic analysis. My fervor for executing tasks correctly was perhaps ignited by witnessing my parents' poor financial management. My zeal and inherent financial skills were noticed by my educators. Before long, I was remaining after class to discuss challenging financial concepts. Someone other than my grandparents saw possibility in me for the first time in my life, genuine potential. I secured esteemed internships at significant financial corporations during my time at university. Every summer presented fresh possibilities, as well as difficulties. High-ranking managers were impressed by my analytical capabilities and meticulousness. During my performance evaluation at a top investment company, my supervisor said, "You possess a natural intuition for this. We would be delighted to have you return next summer." With the exception of calls with my grandparents, I focused intently on my academic work, hardly considering my primary family. I was hired by one of the city's leading financial firms after I graduated. I never would have imagined earning the starting remuneration. I located a small, tidy, and secure one-bedroom living space. I was thankful every morning that I did not have to prepare breakfast for anyone but myself. As I dedicated myself to every new challenge, my profession took off, and I received bonuses and advancements that I could never have dreamed of when I was younger. I progressed to a senior role in 6 years, overseeing intricate portfolios and nurturing significant client relationships. Within the sector, I became recognized for my strategic thinking and analytical precision. Every accomplishment felt like a subtle confirmation that my parents had underestimated my capabilities. In the meantime, I learned from my infrequent chats with my grandparents that Sarah's sales career wasn't flourishing as she had planned. David, Sarah's spouse, had difficulty maintaining a career. They were constantly requesting funds from my parents. My grandma told me in one of our weekly conversations, "Your mom depleted her pension fund last month to aid them with rent. They just cannot decline her." Following a year, circumstances worsened. Even with our parents' assistance, Sarah and David were no longer able to cover their rent. They and their pair of youngsters, now 8 years old, returned to occupy my former bedroom. My parents, who had previously been extremely proud of Sarah's abilities, suddenly had to support her entire family in addition to their favorite offspring. I maintained my detachment, concentrating on building my own existence and profession. Every bonus, promotion, and successful transaction served as a subtle confirmation that I was not the failure my parents had predicted me to be. I had substantial investments and funds by my mid to late 30s, which included enough for a down payment on a residence of my own. Then, everything changed. My grandpa passed away unexpectedly after experiencing a severe cardiac event. It was a profound bereavement. He was the paternal figure who had stood by me when no one else did, and he had been more than just a grandfather to me. After that, my grandma, who had spent more than 55 years with him, seemed to lose her vibrancy. She followed him less than 2 months later. In every significant sense, they had been my true parents, and suddenly they were no longer present. Behind me, at the funeral home, I heard my mother's voice while I was arranging my grandmother's service. "Clara, would you like some assistance with the plans?" She was standing there when I turned around, appearing older and more fatigued than I had recalled. A part of me wished to tell her to depart, but I refrained because of the look on her face. "Certainly," I said to myself, "that would be helpful." My parents began to open up over the course of the subsequent few days as we prepared the service. They acknowledged that they were encountering difficulties. One afternoon when we were selecting floral arrangements, my dad admitted, "We have not been financially prosperous since retirement." He went on to say, "We barely managed to make ends meet," before mentioning Sarah's pair of youngsters. I recognized that my sister and her household continued to reside with them and depend on their diminishing resources. We convened in a wood-paneled chamber for the reading of the Testament, 1 week after we laid my grandma to rest. Sarah and David were lounging on chairs next to my parents, while I sat opposite from them. The tension was thick enough to sever with a sharp edge, and the room carried the scent of furniture polish and aged documents. Though none of us realized it at the time, what ensued would initiate a sequence of events that would permanently alter our family's connections. After adjusting his spectacles, Mr. Thompson, the legal representative, commenced reading in a steady tone. I anticipated the standard legal terminology, but what followed caused everyone to pay attention. "To our cherished granddaughter, Clara, We bequeath our property at Elm Avenue and the amount of $160,000. The ensuing quiet was overwhelming. My mother tightened her hold on my father's arm until her knuckles turned pale and Sarah's mouth dropped wide. After clearing his throat, Mr. Thompson continued. He glanced at my mother and said, "And a personal note from Mr. Bennett to his child, Susan." The message stated, "Recall, Susan, that we gave you $210,000 exactly when you were most in need. As we respected your needs back then, we anticipate you will respect our final determination." My mother's cheeks turned pale after flushing red. Sarah and David looked at each other anxiously, while my dad gazed at the floor. In the parking area, my parents approached me once the lawyer wrapped up and took his papers. Their earlier composed attitude during the memorial arrangements was replaced by a look of urgency. With a trembling voice, my mother said, "Sarah, dear, you have to understand we just always expected to inherit the place. We're struggling financially, and we were relying on it. The bank payments, Chloe's family's expenditures. We could really use the property," my father continued, smoothing his gray hair, mentioning how her little ones needed a yard to play in. Chloe also added her pleas. However, I simply got into my vehicle and drove away. I kept dwelling on my grandparents' parting gift over the next couple of weeks. My life was firmly established near the town, and although the house I had inherited held countless precious memories, it was far too spacious for just me. Meanwhile, I learned about my parents' increasing money troubles from our weekly phone calls. Helping Chloe and her family had used up their savings set aside for later years, and they found it progressively harder to make their own mortgage payments. I considered it thoroughly before making a decision. My plan was to use the money from selling my grandparents' residence, combined with my own funds, to buy my parents a nicer place, perhaps a bungalow with a pleasant yard that wouldn't be too much upkeep. Something comfortable for their retirement years. I was astonished by their reaction when I shared my concept with them. They actually began crying with happiness. After a number of weeks searching for houses, we eventually located the perfect spot, a beautiful, low-level home designed without steps, featuring wide entrances, located in a quiet area. My parents couldn't stop talking about how excited they were after the purchase was finalized. "A proper welcoming gathering is what we need," my dad said. "It is the least we can do to handle all the preparations." "That would be lovely," I said, planning to present them the ownership papers at the event. "Let me know when, please." Weeks passed. Even though I had plenty of tasks to complete, I kept expecting an invitation. "Oh," my mom would say, "we're still arranging things. You know these tasks take time." My father would also say, "We want it to be just right. We'll inform you shortly." I was bothered by their vague answers for some reason. One evening, I was typing Chloe's name into a social media site following another evasive phone conversation from my mother. We weren't connected online, and I hadn't viewed her profile in years. Just hours before this was posted, "Can't wait for this Saturday's welcoming gathering for Mom and Dad. Excited to celebrate with everyone in this wonderful new abode." Loads of friends and relatives confirmed their attendance in dozens of replies on the page. Pictures showed caterers being hired and decorations being set up. This was clearly not a spontaneous get-together. Arrangements had been ongoing for some time. I contacted my mother with trembling fingers. "Hello, Mom? I wanted to ask more about the welcoming gathering. Do you have a date in mind yet?" "Oh dear, not quite yet," she said easily. "Most likely in a few weeks. The specifics are still being worked out." Everyone except me, it seemed. I had to make a choice as that Saturday approached. Should I confront them? Do I have to forget about it? How could they exclude me from the celebration after everything that had occurred, after I had bought them this property? I would eventually find out, but not in the way I had anticipated. I parked a block away from the house I had purchased for my parents on Saturday. I could see scores of people mixing inside through the windows, including Chloe's friends, acquaintances, and family. My father offered tours of the property I bought, while my mother, wearing her special occasion jewelry, greeted visitors at the entrance. Sparkling lights and festive banners adorned the residence. Laughter and music spilled out onto the street. It was clear that they had spent weeks organizing this welcoming celebration to which I was not invited. For a while, I sat in my car and watched Chloe's youngsters chase each other past crowds of adults who were watching them. I could see moving containers with Chloe's handwriting on them stacked in the corner through the large front window. The process of relocating her family's belongings had already commenced. I breathed deeply before slipping in through the side door. The aroma of flowers and prepared meals filled the residence. I heard my father speaking to a group of people in the main room. When I followed his voice, after all these years of dedication, we finally managed it. Purchased our ideal dwelling, my mother excitedly added. Don't overlook Chloe. She helped so much with the initial cost. Such a fantastic daughter, always prioritizing family first. Unlike certain individuals, she went on, in response to a question about me, she said, our younger child hasn't assisted us at all, too preoccupied with her occupation to care about relatives. Heat rushed to my face as I stood in the doorway. Everyone jumped when I said, actually, I think you've got that reversed. There was a complete silence in the room. My dad was the first to recover, smiling tightly. Sarah, what a surprise. Especially since you failed to invite me to the welcoming gathering for the property I acquired, I said as I entered the room. The quiet stretched longer. His surprise quickly aroused Chloe's spouse's curiosity, asking why everyone appeared so upset. One of the youngsters tugged at Chloe's sleeve. You purchased it, yes, but it's ours now. You can't anticipate everlasting appreciation, my mother said with a hint of sharpness. With heads nodding around him, my father added, that's right, gaining confidence. And honestly, you're not welcome here. This is a family event, and Chloe and her family will be living here too, my mom said. They've already sold their place. It's all finalized. The youngsters need a stable home. I took out a binder from within my bag. I remarked, you seem to be mistaken about something, and held out the ownership and deed documentation. This property belongs to me. I never transferred it over to you. The color of my mother's face shifted from pale to gray. My father began to ramble on about his duties to his relatives. Chloe's confident grin faded when she realized that her arrangements were failing. Despite my shaking hands, I continued, maintaining a firm voice. I was intending to give it to you tonight. I believed this could be a fresh start for us all. Instead, you've shown me nothing has altered. When my mother said, you can't do this, her voice became a shriek. We're your parents. No, I said softly. You're merely the individuals who gave birth to me. My actual parents, my grandparents, instructed me that relatives means more than genetics. They also taught me about managing finances, which is why I own this property, and you do not. I turned to speak to the startled visitors. I apologize, but this party is concluded. This is my residence, and I'm asking everyone to depart. My parents, Chloe, Daniel, the youngsters, and all of their visitors departed in tears from the porch. I watched them driving off one by one until the street was empty. In the yard, the decorative lights continued to shine mockingly. Inside, partially empty drinks and discarded food plates covered every flat area. The house, which was meant to be my gift of reconciliation, ended up being the breaking point in our connection. A couple of weeks later, I discovered that they had purchased an apartment using the funds from the sale of their prior home. 3 generations crowded into a space meant for 2 people when Chloe, Daniel, and the youngsters moved in with them. They attempted calling me constantly at first. Their voicemails varied between angry accusations. You've become so cold. Just like your grandparents cautioned us you would. And attempts to induce guilt. How could you do this to your own relatives? I blocked their social media profiles, email addresses, and phone numbers as a reminder of everything that went wrong in my family. The house is currently unoccupied. I have an appointment with a property agent tomorrow. It's not worth trying to fix everything. Like old photos in a dusty album, some connections are better left in the past. When I eventually have kids of my own, I've made a promise to myself that they won't ever need to earn my fondness or compete for my attention. In contrast to my parents, I will cherish my kids just as much and without stipulations, just as my grandparents cherished me. Every painful truth about my relatives was revealed that Saturday night. I had not been invited to the welcoming celebration my parents were hosting. When I arrived at the property I had purchased, dozens of visitors, catered food, and, most revealing of all, moving containers with Chloe's handwriting scattered around were all visible through the windows. My father proudly declared, after all our hard work, we finally achieved it. purchased our ideal dwelling, as I slipped in through the side entrance. In her remarks, my mother praised Chloe for allegedly contributing to the initial cost. She dismissed inquiries about my absence by stating, "Oh, Sarah's too focused on her career to care about relatives." The incident captured every slight I had experienced as a youngster, every instance of preference shown toward Chloe, and every moment in which I had been treated as an afterthought. I had never before experienced such clarity as I stood in the doorway, witnessing my parents rewrite history by preparing to relocate my sister's family onto my land without even consulting me. "Actually," I said, causing the room to become silent. I believe there was a misunderstanding regarding the purchaser of this property. I could discern everything I needed to know about their actual feelings from the expressions on their faces: astonishment, shame, and then anger. My mother was the first to recover, her voice sharp with a sense of entitlement. "What's done is done. The property is ours now, and Chloe's family needs the space." I took out the ownership documents and the property deed. "No, the property is mine. I never transferred ownership to you. I was planning to give it to you tonight, but clearly that would be a mistake." "You can't do this," my mother said in a terrified tone. "We're your parents. We have rights." "The only rights you possess," I said quietly, "are the ones I choose to grant you. And right now, I'm choosing to ask everyone to leave my property." Following that, there was a panicked departure, with visitors rushing out with plates of food still in hand, Chloe's youngsters sobbing in confusion, and my father attempting to maintain some dignity while directing people to their vehicles. "How could you do this to your own relatives?" was my mother's final attempt at manipulation, but it failed against my newfound determination. The 5 of them were crowded into a small flat. In the weeks that followed, the messages began right away. My father demanded a reconsideration. Chloe pleaded with tears for her children's stability, and my mother accused me of cruelty. They were all blocked by me. The empty house served as a reminder of what might have been: a fresh start, a chance for making peace. Instead, it served as the catalyst for my ultimate separation from a family that had never fully accepted me. A month later, I sold it and used the money to fund my own future. Some inquired if I would ever attempt to repair those connections or forgive them. However, I came to understand that forgiving does not always involve allowing harmful individuals back into your existence. Forgiving oneself for leaving can be necessary at times. Before putting away the old wedding picture of my parents, I promised my future children that they would never experience the distress of conditional affection, the hurt of being compared to a sibling, or doubt their position in the family unit. With me, the pattern of partiality and emotional pressure would cease. Chloe's youngsters were playing in the tiny yard when I last drove by my parents' apartment building. I briefly experienced sadness, but it was for the connections that never truly existed in the first place, not for the ones I had lost. My grandparents instructed me that a true family is built on affection, esteem, and backing one another. Despite the belief that genetics is more significant than other ties, I carry their lessons with me as I commence this new phase of my existence. Affection ought to be freely given rather than demanded. Family is more than just genetic ties. Walking away is sometimes the healthiest course of action. I didn't open my mother's last unread electronic message, so I deleted it. Any defenses or accusations it contained were no longer relevant. At last, I had discovered how to place my own worth ahead of their conditional approval. Their type of familial devotion has no place in the life I'm constructing now. New possibilities await us in the future, free from the burden of attempting to gain affection from those who are unable to freely provide it. I learned what true family looks like from my grandparents. I'll build that kind of family for myself someday, one based on mutual esteem, unconditional affection, and the knowledge that each person is equally important. At long last, the chapter of being the family's secondary consideration is concluded. Being the creator of my own life is only the commencement of my journey. Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more surprising real-life stories happening around you.